What's up, guys? I wanted to let you know that this last week I really messed up my back. I was doing some lifting and I didn't even really feel anything give. I just noticed that my back was getting a little sore and then I tweaked it and I should probably back off a little bit. And sure enough, within a couple hours, I could hardly walk or even stand up. I was in so much pain right on the right side of my back. So, with my background and everything that I've been doing over the last decade, I was like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to do an experiment on myself to figure out what I need to do exactly for this. Now, I will tell you guys, I stretched out for an hour and a half doing every stretch I could imagine and everything I thought I should be doing for my back. And I found three specific exercises that were extremely beneficial for me to get a much quicker recovery and reduce my pain. And so I want to share that with you guys today. And I also want to share what happened with my back and what I think caused it. So for any of you guys that are suffering with back pain, hopefully this is good insight for you guys. If you guys can tell right now, the way that I'm standing, my weight is actually still shifted to the right. So this is called a right lateral shifted pelvis. So when you look at yourself in the mirror and you put your hands down at the side, you're typically going to notice that if you're shifted in the pelvis, there's going to be a greater gap on one side versus the other. So for me, I'm shifted like this, and I'm not doing that intentionally. I'm exaggerating it right now so you can see it a little bit better, but I am still shifted to that side. And so what I want to do to correct that is loosen up a handful of muscles. And these are the three most important exercises that I found that reduce my back pain. And I'm talking, I stretched for an hour and a half doing every stretch I could think of. And it helped while I was doing it, but then that pain would come right back. But these three stretches helped me a ton and actually reduced my pain to where I could actually function and walk again. So to understand what happened is ultimately my glutes are really weak on the side. So you have a gluteus medius and minimus on both sides, and it controls how your hips move back and forth. So if when you're working out or you're walking, you're doing different activities, if these are really weak, then it's going to cause your pelvis to shift from one side to the next. Now, what can happen is if you're stronger on one side versus the other, then that can cause more of this torsion through your pelvis. And over time, it creates a lot of stress on your low back and can cause you a lot of discomfort. So I know that I have weak glutes. Some people tell me that I don't have any glutes, but that's just a genetic thing. And it's something that's just happened over time because I don't work on my glutes that much, which I'm going to start doing that. But here are the three exercises that I started focusing on that I saw immediate relief with that also gave me a sense of not just short-term relief, but long-term relief. The first one was just doing McKenzie back exercises. So I found that I could hardly stand up and I knew that I needed to loosen up my hip flexors. So the first thing that I did was I literally just lied on the ground and I was on my forearms and just relaxing there for about 8 to 10 minutes. It was extremely beneficial. And after my back started relaxing and it stopped spasming, I turned into doing prone press ups. And so I went from pushing myself up and just holding it to doing repeated motions. And I'm talking, I did this for like 30, 40 times. And what you really want to do is relax as much as possible and let your hips sink down to the ground so you can get as much extension in your low back as possible. So I went from lying like this to coming up to my elbows and then just dropping my hips down. And then from this position, I actually would go back and sit on my heels and then just go right back down into it. And each time I would do this, I would notice that my hips would drop lower and lower. It was extremely beneficial, and I saw immediate relief with it and more mobility. Now, that didn't take my pain away completely, but I will tell you, when I started stretching out my quads and my hip flexors, my pain did start going away. And I was like, whoa, this is extremely powerful. And there's a lot of different ways to stretch out your hip flexors. But as you've seen in some of my other videos, this is one of my favorite ways to loosen up your hip flexors, which will take off a lot of pressure on your low back. So the reason that you want to stretch out your hip flexors here in the front, particularly your psoas muscle, is because it attaches deep in your groin and then to the anterior aspect, the front aspect of your spine and your low back. And if it's really tight, it's going to pull down on those vertebrae and compress that area in your low back, which can ultimately irritate your nerves, your discs, a lot of different things, a majority of the things in your low back. And so if you loosen that up, you can see a world of difference. So one of the stretches that I was doing for both sides is I would get in this lunge position, drop my hips forward, bring my shoulders back, and then I'm actually going to bring my heel towards my bottom, just like this. and then I relax. And as I relax, I'm going to feel like my hips can sink further down into it. Now I'm going to take that back foot and I'm going to push down into the floor as if I'm trying to push it away. And when I do that, I'm going to relax and I'm going to feel that hip keep releasing even more and more. If you notice, I'm doing it on the left side. So if I do it on the right, I'm definitely not going to be able to do it as much. And while you're doing these exercises, it shouldn't be extremely agitating to your low back. You just need to be doing it to the point where you feel a good stretch, not really sharp pain. So when I'm holding this lunge, I'm pushing down once again with my foot, and then I relax and let that pelvis drop into it more. I'm going to keep doing this over and over again until I feel like the stretch is not there anymore. Once I did the quad stretches and loosened up the quads and the hip flexors, and after I did the McKenzie back extensions, I was starting to get some relief. But I still, after about 10 to 15 minutes, I was having severe pain and I couldn't even stand up. Even sitting in a car for a prolonged period of time was really bothering me. And so I was thinking about this and I was like, man, if my glutes were firing better, would that help correct my lateral shift? And so I was thinking, what exercise is going to correct my glutes firing and help correct my lateral shift? Well, there's this Captain Morgan exercise, and ultimately what you're going to do is if you have more pain on one side of your back, then you're going to focus on putting that side up against a wall. So for me, my shift is to the right, and so it's going to seem kind of counterintuitive, but I actually want you to put your weight and your hip into the wall on the side that's affected. So just like Captain Morgan, you're going to lift that side, that leg up towards the ceiling. You're going to put your shoulder into the wall, and I want you to bring this outside leg out just a little bit. Okay, and when you're holding this position, you're going to drive this hip into the wall. So I'm keeping that leg straight. This is called an isometric exercise. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to push my hip as hard as I can into that wall. And as I'm doing that, I'm activating these glute med, min, and maximus muscles. And then I relax and I go right back into it. You're not going to see a lot of movement in your pelvis. You're just going to feel a contraction of this muscle. And I will tell you, when I was doing it, I couldn't do more than 2 or 3 without extremely fatiguing this area, and I had to take a break. So once again, I'm getting up against that wall. I'm driving that hip into that wall until I feel a good contraction here. I'm not trying to really activate the hamstrings in the back, and I just hold it for a couple seconds, and then I relax. And then I hold it again. I'm trying to use these glutes to push that hip into the wall. After I've done that for a couple of times, I started to see that I'm really starting to get some relief. And so I kept doing this over and over and over again. And then I actually started doing it in the car. So I'd be sitting in a position where my leg was up against the outside of the door. And while I was driving in cruise control, I would start pushing this knee and this hip up against the door like this. Once again, that's activating the glutes and it's decreasing the lateral shift and taking pressure off my low back. I strongly suggest doing these exercises repeatedly. Those 3 dramatically improve my pain. And I'm talking from not being able to walk and get up out of a chair without severe pain to now being pretty functional. I would say my pain's about 90% better. So those 3 exercises is what I suggest. Let me know in the